Greetings. This is David Triana, and we are on a special edition of Making Connections. As everybody knows, election season is hot. It's deep into it right now, and on 18 August, there's going to be several local and regional elections, and there's also going to be some primaries for choosing the candidates to represent the different parties in the general election in November. Because of that, Conexion Media Group has been doing several events to invite the elected officials or the people that are running for elected office here in the region to come on and talk to us and talk to our audience, our multicultural audience that we reach out or we reach with our programs and with our activities that we do with Conexion Media Group. And we have a very special guest with us today. His name is Ray Sansom, and Mr. Sansom is running for the Okaloosa County Superintendent of Schools, and he has been kind enough to join us. We know that it's very busy for them at this time, but we really appreciate it. Mr. Sansom, welcome to Making Connections. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thanks for letting me join you today. Doing really well. The campaign's just around the corner, less than 2 weeks away, so we're on a countdown and working hard, and feel real good about how everything's going. But this is the final stretch, and we'll just keep doing everything we need to do to win this race.
It sure is, and 18 August will be coming upon us here very soon. So again, we are very grateful for you to come and talk to us. First of all, again, you are hopefully talking here to our multicultural audience throughout the region here through our program. We kind of focus our triangle of influence, as we like to call it, to the northwest Florida and southern Alabama area. So we're pretty sure we're going to reach a lot of people in that area, and especially in the Okaloosa County area that you will be serving. So let's start by you telling us who Ray Sansom is.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I was born and raised here in Okaloosa County. I met my wife in the 4th grade, so we've known each other a long time. And yesterday, August 4th, we celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary. So we've been married for a long time and known each other since the 4th grade. And I'm very blessed. She's a wonderful person. It's wonderful when your wife is your best friend as well. So we've been best friends and husband and wife for 36 years. And we have 3 girls. They all went through the Okaloosa school system, like my wife and I. They're now all grown out of college and have 2 grandchildren. So we all love Okaloosa County. I love our school system very much. And my parents moved here in 1956. So we've been around for Walton Beach for my whole life. I wasn't born yet at that time, but here. And so I been very fortunate to serve Okaloosa County on the county commission from 92 to 2000. And then I was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2002 and served until 2010. And for the last 10 years, I've been the vice president of school administration. I've been a dean of students and a principal for dropout prevention schools throughout Northwest Florida, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, and Walton counties. So I have a mixture of education and politics. I have a master's degree in educational leadership, and I have a specialist degree in educational leadership. And a lot of people may not be familiar with a specialist degree, but a specialist degree is 30 hours of doctorate work in educational leadership. So it's a degree above master's, but not quite where a doctorate, like a guy described it the other day, it's almost a doctorate degree. So
that's for sure.
And, so anyway, so I love education. I love our school system, and want to see us get our district back on track. I want to see our district heal again, and some of the key issues that I'm running for, we'll talk about today.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank you.
And most definitely, you bring a lot of experience in different fields, but especially the education field and also in the political side of the house, which are both very important for this position, aren't they?
They really are, because the superintendent of schools is not a school principal that's a little bit bigger than just being a school principal. That's not the job. The school superintendent is really a chief executive officer, or like I like to call it, chief executing officer. You have to execute well whenever you're a school superintendent. For example, over half of the money for the school district's budget, so the budget's $400 million, so over half of that money comes from Tallahassee. So certainly been a former legislator or former budget chair, to understand how Tallahassee works, to know how the budget works, is going to be a benefit, I think, to Okaloosa citizens and to our school district. So that's the politics side of it. And then you have the chief executive or side of it, where you have over 4,000 employees, you have over 30,000 students, and you have the largest transportation system in the county with school buses, the largest lunch program in the county with school lunches, and so we're the largest employer outside of the military. So it is a lot more than just being a school principal or being an educator. It has to understand education is important, but to understand how to run an organization and understand how the political systems work together is key. So I think my mixture of education and politics and just knowing how the community works as a former county commissioner and legislator, I just think it brings a very unique approach to the school district and to the superintendent's office.
I understand, and most definitely a very important position to fill.
Yes.
That is for sure. A couple of years ago, as most of us know that have been living in this area, and actually I'm pretty sure it was a state level and even a national level issue, we had a terrible situation involving a special needs child and the handling
Yes.
of that child as it relates to the potential abuse that may have occurred. That was, again, a very difficult situation for the school district, and I'm sure for everyone that was involved there in the leadership part of the Okaloosa County Superintendent of Schools administrative offices. What do you think what do you think took place, and what would you have done differently?
Yes, great question. So my opponent, campaigns are about contrast. So, my opponent was over the special needs department. He was Mary Beth Jackson. She was a school superintendent. He was her second in charge, assistant superintendent over special needs and other areas. And unfortunately, he said that he did not know anything about the child abuse investigation or the child abuse a year and a half later after it happened, that he just read about it in the newspaper. Well, that got my attention. That's not leadership. And I think that's avoiding the tough issues that happen. So specifically what happened in this situation is that there was a student that has autism and nonverbal. There was an investigation that took place at an elementary school. 21 employees were interviewed, and there was a whole host of issues that came out of that investigation. And through that investigation, there were numerous arrests. The teacher was found guilty of abusing the student and is in prison today. And what I would do differently is that, believe it or not, David, the family never knew this was going on. No one ever called the family. No one ever called the dad. The dad found out accidentally over a year later. And you can imagine how, as a parent, parents of special needs children, grandparents, friends of any child, but certainly our vulnerable students and special needs, autistic, nonverbal students, that their parents find out a year later by accident. And so I'm running because I believe that my opponent was negligent in their job. I don't know how that you don't know what's going on whenever you are specifically over that department. I think it's your job to know. And if you don't know, then I don't think you've done your job properly. So because of that, it's created such uncertainty in our district, and it's created fear, and it's created mistrust throughout our whole district. And I just don't think that this whole cloud of dissension and unrest and uncertainty goes away until there's a change in the superintendent's office. And so I tell people all the time that, the most important, whenever you think about it, I think that our country, our community, our school district, I think we're defined how we treat the most vulnerable that we serve. And the most vulnerable that we served have been mistreated. And my opponent said he knew nothing about it. And just the last week or two, 5 more families have filed lawsuits that are parents of special needs children, saying that my opponent had failed them and should have known what was going on. And so it's not just this one incident. Unfortunately, it's starting to become more. So there's now 5 more federal lawsuits and more parents stepping forward saying that under Ms. Jackson and Mr. Chambers, the whole special needs department was having children abused, and the parents didn't know anything about it, and now they're finding out and they're filing federal lawsuits. So I believe over time in leadership that you have to lead in good times, and we all like to lead in good times, but as school superintendent, you have to also lead in the bad times and the messy times and the ugly times under every circumstance. And what I have observed and what I've seen and why I'm running is that I see my opponent, he's okay with the good times, But when it gets rough and tough and messy, he kind of tucked and ran and said he didn't know anything about it. And I don't believe that ever will create the trust back into our school system, back into our teachers and to our administrators until there's a change there. And that's my motivation for running, and everything that has come off of that with the culture that has to change is why I'm running. So in contrast, I oversee dropout prevention schools, and we did have that was accused of abusing a student. The student was being very disruptive in the classroom. The teacher removed him out of the classroom, and the parent felt like he did not remove him properly. So the contrast is that we called the parent right away. The parent knew immediately. We called the school resource officer. We called DCF, and I also called the news media and said, "This is what's going on in our school. You need to hear it from me, not find out about it later." And to me, that's the contrast. You have to, we have a policy, and I will as superintendent, that if a student is in your office, if a teacher is being investigated, the first person you call after DCF is the parent, because they're still your child. But you can just imagine, though, David, I still to this day think to myself, this child could not go home and verbalize this to his dad, but his dad didn't know for over a year. But his dad will tell you that his behavior at home started just changing drastically, and he didn't know why. Right. And now he's, blaming himself, saying, "Why didn't I know? Or I should have known." And as I told him, it's the obligation of the school system, of Mr. Chambers, to call and let you know what's going on. Not say, "You don't know about it. I'm not going to tell you about it." And even worse than that, I didn't know about it either, which is kind of, to me, hard to believe. So you can, that incident and the other 5 lawsuits that are out there has just created a culture that I don't think changes until there's leadership change.
I understand, and that was a very, very difficult situation. And you are correct in the sense. I am the parent of a special needs kid. I have an 18-year-old with autism, and it is a very hard thing for us as parents, leaving our child at the school. And the majority, I would say 99 or 100% even of the teachers that I've met, and the counselors and administrators that I've met, they care for our kids, obviously. Absolutely. But there's always the chance that something is going to happen. And the biggest fear of us parents of that kid, and in the case of my son, who may not be able to verbalize what may be occurring in the schools, that's one of the toughest things for us, because we don't know, and he or she cannot tell us. So definitely, that is something that is a very big concern for parents. What is a message that you would like to give to the parents of special needs kids in Okaloosa County?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's imperative that when I get elected, that I meet with the special needs parents and let them know that it's a new day. I always say it's a new day with Ray is my vision and my slogan, but it really is a new day, that we will have an extremely qualified director of ESC. I think that's going to have to happen immediately. Is that someone that's over that department, training the people that work with special needs every day, that they're very qualified and communicate well and let parents know what's going on. Secondly, the staff's going to have to be well trained and make sure that they understand everything that takes place in a special needs classroom. And then thirdly is that if something does happen, the parent will know first. They will not have to find out accidentally by someone saying something to them, or an investigation going on, that they don't know anything about it. And so it is really has to be our focus, as I said earlier. The most vulnerable students are the ones that's how we're judged, is how we treat the most vulnerable, I think, because that's our obligation. And they have to know that their children are safe when they get sent to us. So as an example, the teacher that was arrested and is in prison today, also worked for my opponent at another school, and he transferred her out for the same reason. But still, that's what I mean. I just can't imagine by him saying that he didn't know that was there. He dealt with it at a school, and he was a principal. And that's what I think the parents just need to know, that someone that's not part of that and let it go somehow, so they didn't know or someone didn't tell them. Because when you have a situation as a parent, excuses don't matter. They want answers. And so whenever, my experience has been, David, whenever people feel uncertain, they want clarity. They want you to be very clear, very, very clear. So the special needs parents feel very uncertain about their safety of their children right now. It's going to be my job to come in and be very clear about what are we going to do, who's going to be running this department, and how we're going to communicate with them, and how are they going to know their child's safe. And I will make sure that they know very clearly how we're going to move forward, so we can build certainty back into their lives.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we're going through the pandemic still.
Yes.
It's been several months already, and the schools are getting ready to reopen. Do you agree with the governor's decision to reopen the schools? Even though we're going through an uptick with COVID, I know that obviously things may be getting better, but
Right.
That's a big concern, obviously, on the part of
Sure.
parents in general, and the special needs side too, obviously.
Absolutely. So let me tell you what I agree with is that I agree that it should be a local decision. I don't agree that the decision should come out of Tallahassee. I'm a former legislator. I understand the bureaucracy of the Department of Education very well, and it's a heavily bureaucratic department. That's why we have local elected school boards. That's why we have local elected school superintendents, because they are local. And I think those decisions should be made locally, not made by the governor. I think guidance from the governor is fine, and guidance from the Department of Education is fine. But I'm a proponent that the final decision ought to be made by the local school districts, because every county is different. You know, as you see right now, you see an uptick in Okaloosa. Okaloosa schools should be able to make their decision for Okaloosa schools. So I'm a strong proponent that every individual school district ought to be making that decision. So let me tell you what again, talking about uncertainty, none of us can say we really understand what's going to happen, and we can't say we have all the answers to how we're going to open up. We have to be honest about that. But what we can be is very clear. So I think that when the schools are supposed to start back on the 31st of August, we have to make sure, or I will make sure as a school superintendent, that before we make a final call that the schools are open, that we have a good, reasonable approach with the health department, with the people that know the science of it, as well as the school district requirements of it. How do you weigh that with the parents and the economy, and all that has to be brought in together. And I'm convinced, and my experience has been, that reasonable minds prevail. You know, come let us reason together. Let's be reasonable about it. And we need to create a standard of when this happens, school closes, and whenever we are in a place where the virus at these numbers, school opens up. But what I hear parents and teachers say is that, you know, when school opens up, if it has to close again, we don't need to open, close, open, close, open, close. We need to have some clarity and some consistency about that. So I think that we'll continue to see if it's possible to open on the 31st. It looks like that's the direction that the governor wants everyone to go, and I think the local school district does. But when elected superintendent, I will stay very closely also in contact with the health department and make sure that it's safe, because students, as we know, we want them to be safe, but also the teachers and the staff, because we're putting the teachers and the staff right in the middle of it, and they're not having a choice necessarily whenever we open up school. So with that, we also need to have a very strong online program, because I also oversee education in the Department of Juvenile Justice. That's kind of prisons for juveniles is what I oversee, the education part. So this summer we've seen the coronavirus just expand and grow through those facilities, because when you get kids together or people together, school's like a society. When you get all those people together, the chances of it growing is very high. So as I tell people throughout this campaign, I'm elected superintendent, that me and David, you and I can get together, we can create all the policies we want to, but when a parent says, oh, I heard my child's classmate had coronavirus, all the policies go out the window. And parents want answers quickly. So we can plan all the best we can, but I still say parents are going to be the ones that make the final decision, which means we need to have a good, strong online program so we can have a good instruction taking place until there's some way we understand the virus better and can get it under control and live with it and have a vaccination. Whatever it is, I think we're going to need for all of us to get a comfort level. But I have been disappointed that there hasn't been any training that has taken place over the summer with our teachers and with our parents and students. It was a golden opportunity for, I'll just say it this way, I want to be positive about it. If I was a superintendent right now, our teachers would have been working, over the summer, not every day, but the days that they want to come in to learn how to do online even better. So because my goal is this, is that whether they're at home or at school, their teacher's still giving them the instruction. And if seventh grade math is scheduled from 9 to 9:50, I think that when they're at home, seventh grade math should be from 9 to 9:50 with their teacher teaching and students learning. And the instruction is really not any different whether they're at school or at home. We're going to have to get to that quality, to that excellence of education, I think, to meet the standard that I want to see us get to, because I think until, for who knows how long, we don't know, that's uncertain, but the clarity of it is that there's still that good solid instruction, whether they're at home or at school, because that's got to be our goal. And that didn't happen this summer. We're really in Okaloosa kind of starting off where we left off after the spring break. And I don't want to make the coronavirus a political issue, because I don't think it is. I'm not being critical. What I'm saying is we could have done a lot better planning. And so when I get elected, I will immediately get started on getting teachers trained to where they can do the same kind of instruction online as they would in the classroom.
I understand. Yes. And obviously the virtual environment of teaching is very well established at many levels throughout the nation.
University,
the university level, and there's programs that can be looked at and then, and then emulated down at the high school level. So. And
I have started looking into some that I think are some of the better ones. I mean, look at you and I. We're having this interview and been able to get, what information out. Interacting. Classrooms shouldn't be any different. It should be very similar.
That's correct. We'll talk a little bit about the situation that you went through, and I know it was a very difficult situation when you were a legislator up in Tallahassee, and you went through a very difficult time. I had a chance to read a beautiful letter, and very powerful letter by your wife in your website, and I invite everyone to go read that. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Well, so we'll start with the ending first. So, everything that happened, I proved was done right, that I did in the legislature. I ended up going to a criminal trial for something that I didn't do. And the prosecutor, which I had never met him before, he's out of Tallahassee, and very aggressive and honestly kind of very mean individual, probably the meanest person I've ever met in my life, one of them anyway. And for whatever reason, and I still don't know to this day, that he decided that a budget item that I was able to get put into budget when I was a budget chair, it was an emergency operations center for the city of Destin, was a crime. And so I ended up, was able to prove that the budget item was done exactly the way it was supposed to, that my service was done honestly. And the judge told the prosecutor in our trial that if he didn't drop the charges, he'd be the prosecutor, that the judge would. So the prosecutor dropped all the charges, and all my legal fees were reimbursed. And so I proved everything that they tried to accuse me of was done right. And as I tell people, I wouldn't be running for office if I'd done anything wrong, but it was a very tough time for my family, and it was over a 3-year period of time, just grueling through all of it. But I can tell you that everything I've ever done in public life as a county commissioner, as a state representative, every employer that I was ever employed by was investigated and looked at. As I was telling a group earlier today, that every website I've ever looked at, professionally or personally, every text I've ever sent out, every email, every check I've written, every tax return I've ever had, every phone call I've ever made was checked into and investigated for some reason, and proved that I did everything right. And so it was a difficult time, and my wife did a really nice job of this, writing our experience. But as I will say, though, that I think one of the greatest qualities, or maybe life experiences to this job, to be, I think, hopefully an effective, caring, decisive superintendent, was that experience. It taught me more than any good experience I've ever had. I tell people this all the time, that I don't want to be the person I was, because it changed my whole view of life, and the faith that we talk about as Christians. I had to live it out and see that God did prevail and protected me and my family through it. But also I realized that words matter, and that there's a person on the other side of those articles that are written day after day after day. When I know that I didn't do anything wrong, I had to get my 3 girls and my wife together and say, I promise you I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know who's behind this. I don't know what Willie Maggs has against me. I've never met him before. I'd only heard his name one other time. And I still to this day don't really understand what the reason was behind it. But this is what I knew, is that I had to just finally say that I've got to go prove my innocence. And I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but one of the best things that ever happened for me and my family was to finally say, okay, God, we'll trust you through this trial. We'll go prove our innocence. But on the other end of that, if it had gone wrong, I had a minimum sentence of 7 years. So when I drove off from my house in Destin to Tallahassee, I wasn't sure if I'd see my house for 7 years, knowing I didn't do anything wrong. But thankfully, I had good attorneys and a very fair-minded judge that said to the prosecutor, Mr. Meggs, that Mr. Sansom didn't do everything. He just didn't do it right. He did it perfectly right. He actually was the model of how legislation and community projects ought to be. And so I appreciate people listening to my story. I embrace it. It happened. I will tell you that many days of my life, I would wake up and say, how did this happen? I had officials that come in to our house and they had guns. They went to my children's bedroom. They wouldn't let them go to the bathroom without an agent with a gun, for saying that your dad was a criminal. I mean, I did nothing. So you know what I mean? And it was like living a living nightmare. But in the end, I also realized that you can't be angry, you can't be bitter, because that's a prison to itself. So
that's right.
I've had to learn to be forgiving and pray for my enemies as I'm supposed to, and just understand that things like this does happen in life, and that people can be falsely accused, and it's changed a lot of things. But what I think it brings to the superintendent's office is that I'm not walking in there afraid. I know that the people can say things that are not true, and that you need to be honest, and you need to be very upfront, and you need to be understanding, and just know that life takes a lot of turns and twists. But thank God that that everything prevailed the way that I knew it would if we had a fair judge, and we did. And so I'm sitting here today a very thankful, very grateful person, and also very thankful that people are willing to support us and consider us despite that, and to believe our story, because our story is true, and it's not my story. It's documented, and I went through a whole trial to prove it.
Well, thank you for talking about that again. That is a wonderful letter that your wife wrote, and it's a terrible situation to go through. And I'm sure, as you know, and you have learned, and all of us learned, sometimes from the worst of things that happen to us is when we become the best persons that possible, because we have gone through that travail and through that trouble, Only we know who we are, right? Sometimes in our families, but sometimes still the people that are gonna try and bring us down, they're still out there. So,
well, as I tell people,
congratulations for what what you are doing now after going through that.
Thank you. As I try to say to people, not to say this real quick, is that you may not want to vote for me because you don't like me, but don't pervert justice and say that I did something wrong, because justice did prevail, and perverting justice is not a good thing.
That is correct, and I hope the people that are considering, what to do, will do some research.
Yes,
and look for the right things, as opposed to just hear it from others. Sometimes that's what we should do instead of hearing it from other people. Let's close it out by you telling whoever's watching why they should select you.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for this time very much. And I love Okaloosa County. When I was in the Florida House of Representatives, Okaloosa School District was the model for the state of Florida. We were the model for not just academically, but mentors that we had, and the Take Stock in Children program, how we treated the special needs children. We were the model for the morale of teachers and people that stayed in their jobs for a long time. And so we're not the model anymore. We're not the model in the state of Florida. We're not what people look to as the great school system that I grew up in and enjoyed working in and being part of and representing when I was in the legislature. So I want to work very hard to bring us back to being the best school district again, bringing back excellence. And we have wonderful teachers and great staff. And academically, I want us to be strong, but I also want us to be strong in a great place to go work again. People enjoy their job. They feel supported. They know that the superintendent, the principal, everyone is supporting the teacher and the staff, and they will go to work every day saying, I feel supported. I know that we're all part of the same team again, and that if there's a tough issue, what we dealt with, it won't be brushed under the carpet or someone say they didn't know, and the uncertainty has to go away. And I always try to say this, that the best way to dispel uncertainty is to be clear. So I want to have very clear directions about what the expectations are. I want to let teachers teach again. Teachers do an excellent job, but they feel very controlled, micromanaged right now in our school system. And I want teachers to use their natural skills and abilities to be able to teach again. And I want teachers to know that I'm going to do everything I can to take some of the burdens off of them. Teachers are very burdened with everything seems to fall on the teacher. And so I want to work very hard with our school district, with the legislature to relieve some of the burdens that take place. And then the last thing I would say is that as a former legislator and a budget chair, there is no doubt that the coronavirus is going to affect the school district's budget tremendously. I don't think that there's anyone more qualified to deal with the state budget as a school superintendent than myself. I'm very thankful and grateful for my experience, but being a legislator and also being a budget chair, when I was a budget chair, I oversaw a $73 billion budget, and our school district's $400 million. So I've dealt with big, large budgets to know how to balance them and also know how to make the right places of reduction that we need. And my priority, if we have to make budget reductions, is to reduce administration, but never affect the classroom and never affect the special needs services of our schools. So that's going to be my guiding principle going into this next 4 years.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sansom, for coming on to Making Connections and talking to these multicultural audience that hopefully will reach with this. We want to wish you the best in the race in the next few days that are left here before the 18th. Yes. And we know you're working very hard towards it. And we bring a lot of a wide breadth of experience to the position should you be elected.
Well, thank you. I enjoy getting out by the road waving. So if you see me wave, it's hot out there, but I enjoy it.
Sounds good. And we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, this has been a special edition of Making Connections in our interview with Okaloosa County's Superintendent of Schools candidate, Ray Sansom. We invite everyone to go to his website. We're going to put it up on the screen soon, and research more about who he is, and also about the other candidates that are running for the different positions here within the region. Thank you very much for joining us. We ask you to follow us in YouTube and our Conexion YouTube web or YouTube page, and also in social media with the Conexion Media Group Facebook sites. We are also in Instagram, LinkedIn, and also in Twitter. Thank you very much for being with us. This is David Triana checking off. Until next time, please stay safe and stay healthy.
20 years ago, my sisters and I were asking you to elect our dad to the Florida House of Representatives, and I'm back to ask for your vote again for Ray Sansom for Superintendent of Schools. Here's why. After serving 16 years in elected office at the county and state levels, spending 16 years in educational leadership roles, and getting a specialist degree in educational leadership, Ray Sansom has the right mix of political and educational knowledge to make him uniquely qualified to be Okaloosa County's next school superintendent. It's a new day with Ray.
Do you want to advertise to thousands of Hispanics and non-Hispanics in Northwest Florida and Southern Alabama?
¿Quieres promover tu empresa y producto a miles de hispanos y no hispanos?
Conexion is your most cost-efficient way to do so.
Conexión es tu solución.
We are the largest English and Spanish publication in our region. Our primary mission is to inform, guide, and educate our readers via interesting content.
Somos la publicación mensual en español y en inglés de la más grande distribución en toda la región. Además de las 5,000 copias en papel, tenemos activas las redes sociales, incluyendo Facebook, Twitter e Instagram, y también por Internet.
Conexion is your bridge to connect you to the growing Hispanic market in the region. Call us.
Llámanos.